In this video of functional Python, I want to explain how to use records. Records are very useful to increase the readability and maintainability of code. But records are not a native data type in Python, mostly because a record can be implemented with a class. However, Python offers nameTuple from the collections module. nameTuple creates a class whose main purpose is to be used as a record, making records very easy to use. So let's see how it works. I have here a link to the documentation. You can get all the code and the text of this video at this URL. Now, why do we say that tuples are error prone? And so let's look at this example. We want to read a CSV file, orders.csv. This file does not have any headers that explain the name of the attribute, so we have to rely on the position to be able to access the data. So if we run this program, it will output what we expect. So we have 4 attributes in this file. The first 0 and the third, number 2, is the ID and the date correspondingly. And so as you can see here, if we print the whole record, we have the 4 attributes, the 4 elements of the tuple, or a list. Actually, they're implemented as a list in this case by the CSV reader. And then we can print the 2 values. So now, the biggest issue with using tuples instead of records is that it is error prone. If we forget what the meaning of 0, 1, and 2 is, we might actually swap them. We might use the different index when we're trying to use them. And also, it's not very easy to read the code. We have to remember all the time what is the meaning of 0, what is the meaning of 2. We can create some variables, and that probably alleviates a little bit of the problem. So we can say ID equals 0 and date equal 2, and they'll probably improve the readability and maintainability of this code. But let's look at what nametuples do. Here's an example of how to use them. And my main objective is to illustrate how easy it is to use them. So that you essentially start using them right away. First of all, we have to import from collections. And then when we call nameTuple, it expects 2 parameters. The first one is a label for the record. We'll see where it comes into place. It's mostly for inspecting the contents of it. And then we provide a list of names of attributes separated by space. In this case, we're providing 4. Remember, our data actually has 4 different attributes. We're going to call them ID, customer ID, date, and total. So every time that we use a tuple, this will be the names of our attributes, as we will see. This returns order, which is essentially a constructor for our new tuple. So let's see how we use it. So we still read from the CSV file. And then for each one of them, the first thing that we're going to do is call the constructor. This call with *0 is equivalent to passing each one of the individual elements of the list one by one. So it's just shorter and easier to write. And then let's print it. And finally, we want to access the ID and the date. So notice that we use the period operator, the dot operator, to access the ID as if it was an attribute of the class. In fact, that's what it becomes, an attribute of the class, ID and date. And then this is the output of the program. So as you can see, it's code that is much easier to read because now we have identified very clearly which is the attribute that we want. So let's talk a little bit about the syntax. And as I mentioned before, nameTuple requires 2 parameters, the label and the name of the attributes. And then it returns the constructor for this class. So then every time that we call the constructor, we're essentially creating an object of type myRecord with these 2 attributes. If I pass 1 less attribute than expected or 1 more, I will get an error. Notice that if we print the value, this is what will get printed. The label that we specify and the names of each one of the attributes and their corresponding value, which I think is great because it's very easy to read. And in case we want to inspect its contents. And also notice that we are creating a new class called myRecord, which essentially corresponds to the new data type that we're creating. And then, if we simply want to access the attributes, we can do it with the dot operator and the name of the attribute. So very, very silly. Now, one interesting aspect of named tuples is that we can use them as lists. So we can still access them positionally, 0, 1, 2, 3, etc., depending on how big the record is. Okay, and so relatively easy, relatively straightforward. I strongly encourage you to use them because you really don't have to do much to start using them. So finally, the conclusions. It's powerful and easy to use data structure. Compared to tuples, records reduce the number of errors, and the code is much easier to read and is less likely to have mistakes because we confuse the name of an attribute with another. And finally, the code for this video is in this URL. Thank you very much.